Hello, my name is Alexandra Figueiredo. I am from Polytechnic Institute of Tomar, and I'm going to present this paper with Daniel Alves and Augusto Ferreira that have the title of A Bones and Rituals, a look at the remains of Dolmens 1 and 2 of Rego de Murta. The megalithic and rock art complex of Rego de Murta, this is the designation that we consider to this area, at the present time integrate a set of 14 archaeological sites of recent prehistory. It is located in Poço, São Pedro, country of Alvaiázere, in center of Portugal. The monuments that compose the megalithic complex are essentially recognized on the right bank of this little river, being also observed some discontextualized prehistoric material remains on the left bank near of this area, Ferreira. About this area, on the top of nearby ridge, was observed trace of occupation, namely habitats. By the archaeological record that is recognized, which have been taken place since Neolithic end, like we can prove it by see these dates in here, Dolmen, Rego de Murta, Dolmen 1 and 2 sites. This is the largest monument grouping of the genre in region, comparable to Julgada or Val de Laje or even Val dos Chões that are located more at south in Tomar and the Brands. So, Rego de Murta megalithic complex is composed by the set of diversified monuments, even within elements of the same structural type. We're just going to talk about these two dolmens, and Dolmen 1 and Dolmen 2, but like I told, there are 14 different dolmens, a lot of menhirs and another atypical structures. This diversity is also visible on the depositional context recorded during the occupations period. In terms of architectural structures, the Dolmen 1 is a monument with a distinct chamber and corridor, unlike the Dolmen 2 is of a Alexavert type, with overlapping steels having a continuity between the chamber and the corridor. The Dolmen 1 itself presents a differentiation in the constructive components on each also of its corridor, being one composed by a slabs and other presenting a possible menhir rose and a large post hall which would aid a corridor ceiling support. Outside, the Dolmen 2, like we can see, present a buttress and even sweetening structures, namely an entrance atrium. On the contrary, the Dolmen 1 only had a few smoothing mainstay blocks and no attached structure. Regarding the rituals and the positions observed along these monuments, the difference is made pits in Rego de Murta Dolmen 2 allows to perceive context that still not very far in time as we inferred dates show. In the Dolmen 2, during the Neolithic, with a similar dating for the first time of the period that we can see it in Dolmen 1, we recorded trace presence, but with very fake data. By assumption, they were cleaned before the first Copper Age positions, and at this time constructed the chamber-based slab. After this phase, during the initial median Copper Age, we consider a second period of this complex occupation, in this case, deposit in pits. The pit will then be crowned with longer and more evident bones, as the case of skull caps, as well as ceramic pots used in association with some translated materials. These translated materials are from the other side where was first deposited. In this case, they appear mostly capsized in a condemnation ritual. These structures opened in the rose and sediment from other positions, ending up creating Ristolithic hats agglomerated one upon another, used stones to make the final combination. And here we have example of one of these pits, and you can see the rocks and a ceramical vessel. In Rego de Murta Dolmens 1, this situation is not observed. Here we will find in the next phase, so we will see in this monument innumerations, which we also believe are in the secondary deposition, but without presenting any condemnation or organization structure. In these monuments, we consider that the dolmenical structure with head will still exist, not suffering at top depositions like we believe that would happen in Dolmen 2, but only the positions enter by the door inside of the monument. At this monument, all the bones recovered in the works carried out of these two dolmens are being studied by a team of ambiogramma enterprise that will talk about the osteological results that are being analyzed. So I pass now to Daniel Alves and Augusto Ferreira.
Is Daniel Alves. I'm going to take over from Alexandra. I'm going to talk about the anthropology side of these sites, and specifically the anthropological study of the osteological remains present in the Anta 1 and 2 of Rego da Murta. Me and my colleague Augusto Ferreira, we're both from the Ambigramma, which is a Portuguese company focused on anthropological studies. And we've been conducting a study to these osteological remains. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about the former studies that were done to these remains, especially in the fieldwork. So, in terms of Anta 1, there was a total of 50 individuals identified, 36 adults and 40 non-adults. In terms of sexual diagnosis, there were a total of 6 female and 4 male individuals. To what relates to pathologies, there were very small traces of it, especially of laminar spikes, endosopathies, and weak arthrosis. There was also a low density of carcinogenic lesions. Apoplasias of the dental enamel were mainly observed in 7 teeth, showing very low levels of nutritional stress. There was also evidence of cremation, some of them in buried remains, so there was a clear intention of burying those remains, which relates to some sort of ritual in these times, which is an uncommon thing to this period, but there was this identification, this study done in the fieldwork. In terms of Anta 2, which was the one that was less studied, there were a total of 47 individuals identified from 2002 to 2005. There was a campaign, and in 2007, in the second campaign, there were a total of 22 individuals identified. In terms of paleodemographic and odontologic recording, Anta 1 and Anta 2 are very similar in terms of pathologies and in terms of odontologic lesions. So, small traces of pathologies like laminar spikes, and also small traces of hypoplasias, small traces of carcinogenic lesions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our study. We're focused on Anta 2 at the moment, and so far we have studied and analyzed a total of 1,233 fragments. One of the things we noticed, and it's clear, is there is a high taphonomic action and anthropic action to the bones, which means they are very fragmented. There is a lot of bones, especially long ones, are incredibly fragmented. They are very mixed. So there was a lot of anthropic action in terms of mixing the earth, of excavations prior to the study. There's a lot of the bones are mixed, and they are not clear burial sites and burial mounds, so we can see high anthropic and taphonomic action. In terms of the minimal number of individuals, we have identified so far 10 individuals. Of these 10, we have seen that 8 of them are adults. The other 2 we are still trying to identify. as we have very small fragments to signal those individuals, so we are still trying to, when we progress with more of the study, trying to identify. But at this point, from long bones and craniums, we have an unidentified tiny regions. We've seen from the marks that we can relate to in terms of bone fusion. We can see there are at least 8 adults in this sample so far. We've seen some evidence of injuries and lesions from anthropic changes. So in terms of pathologies, it's similar to what the field work suggests. There are very small signs of laminar spikes at the moment. We haven't seen any other lesions so far, but we have seen some evidence of injuries and lesions that have anthropic changes. So related to anthropic changes, which means there was human action in them, as we're going to show. We're going to show next with some images and some fragments that we have selected. There's also some evidence of dental abrasion. So in terms of carcinogenic lesions, they are very small. There are some evidence of some caries. But we can see there is a lot of abrasion, which signals the use of the teeth from mechanical purposes or also from the diet that they have consumed. Talking a little bit about the fragments, in this first image we can see a fragment of a bone, a tibia. In this case, we can see it's a very small fragment. As I said before, the bones are very fragmented. There are a lot of pieces very broken, and we can see taphonomic changes in terms of coloration, in terms of abrasion from the action of water, from the action of the earth, of the acidic substances in the same earth. In the second image, we have a tooth, in this case a molar. In this molar, we can see the presence of some, as I said, some carcinogenic lesions, little caries, and some abrasion, which the teeth has definitely been. There is definite abrasion. There, the filings are very faint, and you can see some signs of caries. So this relates somewhat to what the fieldwork has said in terms of pathologies. There is a lot of abrasion, which concurs with studies done to other populations of this period, which in their diets were very focused on more raw ingredients, which could cause this abrasion. In this third example, in this case, we can see another fragment. In this case, it's also a fragment of a tibia. We can see some taphonomic action in terms of color, in terms of clear action from taphonomy. But we also see two interesting things. The first one is clearly an abrasion, a very contusion in the bone. We can see there is a contusion bone about half a centimeter deep. The second is right below that contusion. There is a nick. There is a cut in the bone which is very straight. It indicates there may have been some anthropic action, maybe from some lesion, maybe from when the bones were mixed in, or when there was that mixing of the bones. There may have been a cut made from a tool or from that time. In terms of the contusion, we can see in the image next with close-up, where we have it identified, and I hope we can see there is the presence of woven. Not only has the bone started to heal, there is actually presence of woven, which is new bone. So that shows that the bone, not only the lesion was done ante mortem, which means the individual was still alive when this lesion happened, and not only did the bone he was alive long enough for the bone to start healing and start to reconstruct itself, although he died soon after, from what we can see. It also represents, because of the elasticity of the bone, as if this was a lesion done after post-mortem or quite some time later, the bone would break very differently. It would be a break, there would be a breaking of the bone, especially another fragmentation possibly. So the elasticity of the bone in terms of this contusion shows us that the person was alive. There was irrigation. The bone was still wasn't dry when it happened. And the woven shows us that the individual was alive sometime after this contusion, long enough for the bone to start creating new bone and oven in this location. If this lesion was provoked by an accident or some violent act from another individual, we still don't know. It's something quite difficult to determine, but you can clearly see there was some action here, either by an accident or an anthropic action from another individual at the time. The last example I want to talk about is a very interesting one that we found. So in the first image we can see a part of a cranium. This cranium, these fragments have been assembled during the fieldwork and the subsequent studies before ours. We didn't do the fragments, we didn't put them together. And in the first image we can see a small obtrusion, a small hole in the cranium. At first we considered that this would be most likely the sign of a fragment missing, a possible fragment of the cranium that wasn't found. However, we found something very interesting. In the second image, what we can see is an arrow tip, which was identified during the fieldwork. And the information we got from the fieldwork is that both these items, so the fragments of the cranium and the arrow tip, were found in the same place, which means the arrow tip was together with the cranium fragments. This can suggest, not of certain, that this obtrusion, this lesion, could be a result of a violent action of an arrow tip eating the cranium. We're still trying to study and seeing the possibility of this. At this time, it's probably something that we identified quite well. And we're still studying. As I said, the fragments are there are a lot of fragments. They are very broken because of the period, because of all the actions that have been taken in those places along the years. So we're still studying, and we hope to find a lot more cases such as the ones I've just showed. So I want to thank you again for being here, and for listening to us, and have a good day.
Well, to finish this presentation, let me say that the trace elements in Dolmen's complex also show a great network of a commercial trade and contact with other groups, not only by the presence of osteological raw materials, the chrysophase as an example, within each some necklace beans were made, but also by the register of the strontium isotopes of the burial individuals. These data reveal the presence of immigrations in a very significant percentage, at least 20% for Dolmen 1 and 27% for sure from the Dolmen 2. But these individuals who would probably live in another place and arrived in Alvaiázere in adulthood. These findings, together with the pointed out analogies, are revealing of an interconnected social landscape with a little of tenuous cultural differentiation, at least on a regional scale. As an exploratory hypothesis, these individuals could have grown in another landscapes, like in Tejo zone or in the Rego zone, near of the river, and then come to this region and connected to these people by marriage, social exchange, or other covenants, integrating themselves in the resident groups and incorporating their concerns, their behaviors and praxis, but also bring probably novelties on the influences from its original family, and then finish in these monuments. Well, thanks for hearing us, and have a nice Congress.